everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are graduating. We are moving out of the 101 level and going into a little bit more of an advanced topic. And now I love making 101 videos and I have no plans on stopping them. There are so many things I haven't gotten to cover with that yet, but I know there are many of you that have grown as my channel has grown, and you're wondering how you can take your BDSM to that next level, how you can go beyond the things that you already know how to do. And I think the perfect place to start with that is with pain play. Masochism and sadism are super common in BDSM. I would say the majority of people I know in the kink community involve it in their play in some way. So what we're going to be focusing on here is how you can take your masochism to that next level. That could be because you are a brat that desperately needs taming, or you are an insatiable masochist who for some reason cannot find anybody to fully dole out the pain that they need. All of those things are going to be what I'm covering in today's video, and there are lots of reasons why you might enjoy taking, your physical limits to that next place. What I'm not going to be covering in today's video is how to get more bruises. This is something that almost always comes up when I make videos talking about pain play or masochism or anything along those lines, and I have opinions about bruising and having that be a focus in a scene. I really worry sometimes that we focus too much as a community on the external results of a scene versus actually cultivating an enjoyable experience for both parties and making opportunities to connect with partners. Now, this is not to say that wanting bruises is a bad idea or that you shouldn't have scenes that are focused around that. I think as long as it's what you've negotiated for, all of that is totally okay and it's totally a valid decision. I just worry about, as like a content creator, like making videos that focus on that subject too much, because I don't want to be perpetuating what I see as potentially a toxic way of relating to the reasons why we have scenes. So if you guys are interested in that information, I do have a lot of thoughts about it. So if you want that, let me know down in the comment section below, as well as any suggestions you might have for maybe how I could approach that kind of topic without inadvertently like promoting maybe a sort of negative way of thinking about the way that we conduct ourselves in kink. As well, I want to make sure that I mention with this, I am going to be giving you guys a list of ideas, but I think the key to all of this is being willing to experiment. Experimentation is a big part of kink. Like, you think that we all just like woke up one day and we had like this idea that like, hey, it would be a really great idea to recreationally hit people with a giant wooden stick. Like, we all had to take different opportunities throughout our like kink careers to come up with new ideas for things. And I think that the way that you really move forward beyond a basic level in BDSM is being willing to try new things, being willing to experiment, lab things out with your partner. Labbing is a concept that's mostly known within the rope community, but basically it's where you have like little practice moments where you agree to work out certain aspects of a scene in a non-scene context. And I think that can be really powerful as you move into kind of bigger production scenes, more intense scenes, because it gives you an opportunity to kind of fine-tune those little elements you want to have and then combine them all together into one giant, hopefully more successful scene. And that really allows you to gain security, trust, confidence with your partner before you do things that are more intense beyond, again, that basic 101 level. But without further ado, let us get into today's list. My first suggestion is going to be sensory deprivation. Now, those of you who have watched most of my videos on my channel are like, oh my god, Evie, like, why are you bringing this up again? And I know, I mention it all the time, and that's because it really works for me, and I see it as a very underutilized tool in the kink community. Most people who are not otherwise into bondage seem to kind of like steer away from this for some reason. And just hear me out for a second. When you are doing sensory deprivation, basically what you are doing is you are creating a situation where somebody has to focus in on their other senses. If somebody cannot hear, they're going to focus on what they can see. If they cannot see, they're going to focus on what they can hear. That is great for things like mindfucks, but it's also good for impact play in general, because what's happening is if you say remove somebody's ability to hear and see, or at least make it a lot more difficult, they are going to be forced to focus on exactly what is happening in close proximity to their bodies, because their body is searching for that information about, hey, like, what's going on here in this environment? And so that can mean you can do the exact same scene that you've done 100 times with somebody, the same toys, the same order, the same intensity, and because they cannot hear, they cannot see, it is going to feel more intense. So this is also kind of like the lazy top suggestion as well. If you're like, I have trouble like pleasing my partner, and they're like, they want all this intensity, like, you would be surprised like what a good sensory deprivation hood or a blindfold and a pair of earplugs will do to somebody's brain. Like, it will feel much more intense for most people, unless you're like me and you're a total like sensory deprivation slut and you're like, yeah, that's just great on its own and I don't need anything else in the scene. All right, my second suggestion is cold techniques. Now, this would most commonly be associated with cold caning. And what cold techniques are is they're a form of play where you don't warm up the body beforehand. This is why this is an advanced topic. Typically, I would not recommend play that doesn't involve a warm-up segment, because that is what allows the body time to adjust to the sensations. It is what allows people to get into their headspaces. It is what allows people to feel connected with their partner. But cold caning and cold techniques in general, be that with paddles, floggers, what have you, are more effective because it basically like shocks the body. Your body's like, whoa, where are all these sensations coming from? Like, what's happening here? And that can make it feel much more intense. And in particular with caning, that can mean that the marks are more drastic if you are somebody who cares about that kind of thing. So cold techniques can be very effective for that if you want to amp up that intensity level. And I think one of the reasons why this works quite well is not just the physical aspect of the body not being warmed up yet, but also because it creates a different emotional state, I think, for many people. When you are going through a scene and you're warming up and you're moving slowly and you're checking in a lot, that I think for a lot of people has a connotation of a scene that's like casual and light and nice. And usually masochists don't want nice. And having a scene where you're just going into it, like, we're starting at a 5, and like a 5 is 1 now, and a 12 is like where we're gonna eventually get to. Like, when you're going in on it, that kind of creates a scenario where the sadism is elevated, and through that you also have an elevation of the masochist elements as well, or at least that would be my guess. My third suggestion would be playing around with temperature, both physical and chemical. So cold techniques, not necessarily about the temperature literally. This is about the temperature literally. Again, this is something that I've mentioned time and time again in my videos because it works. It works. If you are somebody who doesn't like cold, I apologize. But if you are somebody that can tolerate it a little bit, having something during a scene when you are cooling down the body in some way, or even doing it beforehand, like if you have somebody take an ice bath or a cold shower, or you run ice cubes over them, or you dump a pitcher of cold water on them halfway through the scene, you do something that is altering the temperature on the surface of the skin, that is going to change how one perceives the other sensations that you are feeling. This is most well known when it comes to sharp-edged objects, so things like credit cards or claws or knives. It can make it feel like the skin is cutting open, okay? That's going to be a much, much more intense scene for a masochist, but it also works with other forms of toys as well, assuming that it's safe for them to be around cold and or water. So with this, I would probably actually recommend playing more with metal toys. There are lots of really fun little like DIY metal toys that you can do that aren't like sharp focused. So if you like thuddy play, for example, one of my favorites that I actually just mentioned in the top 3 video that I did is a sock filled with loose change. That can feel really intense. If you have like, I'm not a hardware person, so I apologize, I'm forgetting the name right now, but you basically have like hex bolts and you screw those onto like a metal rod and you have that and you hit somebody with that, or like a galvanized steel pipe. Again, these are advanced suggestions, everybody. Those, especially if they are cold to start with and then you are also cold, or if there's a large temperature difference between the two, that gets very intense. Now, if you want to go onto the warm side of things, that gets a little bit more complicated. The main way that I would probably recommend doing this is by starting off with a wax play scene and then doing impact play over the areas that have had wax on them. Other things that might involve heating up the body in some way, I'm not really sure how to do that, like wouldn't necessarily create a situation where you're risking like burns. So cold is actually a little bit easier to play with, at least from the ideas that I have in my head. However, you can play with temperature from a chemical perspective. So, for example, something that you could do as well here is you could play around with like capsaicin. You could play around with hot sauce, with Tabasco sauce, with peppers. Like, there are so many options for this. Like, if you have a good rubber ball gag, just put a little Tabasco sauce on that before a scene, or maybe have somebody hold out their tongue and they have to hold out their tongue and like holding a little bit of like hot pepper sauce on it before, or maybe you're doing kind of like a humiliation play scene where somebody's like bound, on all of their limbs and they're like on the ground, like tied up like an animal. And they're being forced to eat like a pile of super, super hot, spicy chicken wings, and they have no physical way of like wiping the chemicals off their body. Like, chemical burns are a thing, so obviously, risk profile, blah, blah, blah. But those are just some ideas for that as well. You can also use things like Icy Hot, for example, or Tiger Balm are popular for people when they want to combine like impact play into this sort of situation. I think typically that would be something you would do during the scene itself, or beforehand you apply it and then you do the impact play on top of it as opposed to after the scene. But again, this is all about experimentation and finding what works for your body. If you're going to be doing something that breaks skin though, applying these sorts of chemicals might be something you want to think twice about before you do. All right, my fourth suggestion would be surprise play. I'm not going to dwell on this one too long because I have a whole video that talks about it, but this is sort of the mental and emotional version of the temperature change thing. So the temperature change thing works because it's shocking the body. It's creating an intense new sensation. And likewise, when you're playing with surprise, that's mental, emotional, because somebody doesn't know exactly what's going to happen or what order or what intensity, the brain starts playing tricks on itself. It feels more mentally intense. It feels more emotionally intense. When you cannot predict exactly what is going to happen, in what order, at what intensity level, like, that is amazing. And actually, like, some of the best ways to play with masochists in a truly masochistic way is to not actually give them what they want. And so you could even do a whole surprise play scene where the only thing that you do is tickle their feet with a feather tickler. And like, that would be some next level masochism. I gotta tell you, hats off to you if you decide to do that scene. Please let me know how it goes in the comment section below. All right, now my fifth suggestion is bondage. Again, I think this is something that is very underutilized in the wider kink community. Rope is a wonderful tool. As long as you have safety shears, you don't have to have a lot of pre-existing knowledge to do some simple but effective things with it. So there is one technique that's called the Guatemalan. I have a tutorial for it on my Patreon if you want to figure out how to do that. So basically what it is, it's a pressure cuff with rope that's typically put around the calf. And you can take that principle and apply it with other ties on other parts of the body. And what ends up happening, and actually this is something that happens with other ties in general if they're on for long enough or on for tight enough, but the Guatemalan is like the most well-known extreme example of this. And basically what happens is it's almost like what happens with like clamps, where it hurts going on, and then basically what happens is like all of the blood gets like compressed out of the area, and so you have an area right where the clamp is or where the rope is, where the skin is, if you happen to be a light-skinned person like me, it goes almost white, and then the area around it, in between it, in the case of rope, where you have like, lines going across the body, where that becomes red and more blood becomes trapped in that area. And then when you remove the rope, or while the rope is still on, those areas kind of between where the rope is, where that blood has been pooling, where it's been trapped, that's going to make sensations feel a lot more intense. Again, you don't really not need to know a lot of like rope technique to do this. There are tutorials online. I have my own tutorial, and it can be very effective for ramping up the intensity in a scene because you are creating basically that cuff situation. All right, my sixth suggestion is a little bit off the wall, so hear me out on this one, please. And that would be to add food. I know, this is a weird one. I mean, we did already talk about like hot sauce and Tabasco sauce, things like that. Some people have reported that other types of food can actually increase the intensity of certain sensations. So for example, if you're doing an impact play scene, having honey on the hand or having honey on the butt while you spank it basically creates a more intense stingy sensation. There's something about like the reverberation through the honey that supposedly makes it more intense. I have tried this myself, and I would say, if only because of the unexpected mess, it's quite effective. There are other types of foods that you can play with as well. So something I know a lot of people play with in my local community, it's like a weird thing that people do. I don't know. It's like one of the things we're known for is like cold milk, like ice cold milk. That is a food thing. It's also a temperature thing. And that can be effective for making a very different sensation and a different intensity level from what your partner might be expecting. Another thing that is sort of a completely different way of using foods in scenes would be not so friendly fruits and vegetables. There's ginger, there's also onion. An onion ball gag? Ooh, that's, I'm just, my eyes are watering. My eyes are watering just thinking about it. There's also pineapple. Being forced to kneel on a pineapple is, especially when it's a really underripe one, that's probably not very pleasant. Think of the possibilities when you're going through your local grocery store on your next trip because, there are ideas. There are ways you can use fruits and vegetables in kink in ways you never even thought of before. All right, my final suggestion here is going to be exfoliate. Now, exfoliation is in general a good part of any robust skincare routine, but you can also do it in a kink context. There are two main ways to think about that. One would be exfoliation before a scene and then during the scene itself as part of the scene. So if you do it beforehand, if you have access to a really good, like a Japanese like exfoliating cloth or like Korean exfoliating gloves, or if you can go to like a Korean spa, that would be the number one way to do it. Because basically what you're doing is you are removing basically the top layer of skin, and you are removing all of the built up soap and dead skin cells and all of those things that can get left on your skin, and that's going to create, a situation where you're revealing skin's freshest layer, and that can make things feel more intense for sure. Even honestly, like just using a shaving razor like on your body beforehand, like, because a lot of times, like especially sort of the cheaper razors, they will also remove skin along, not enough typically for you to visually notice, but like they do also usually remove a bit of skin while they're going through the hair, and that can also make it feel more intense. I would say the way that makes it way more intense is to exfoliate during the scene itself. And the most intense version of this that I know would be to basically take a high grit sandpaper, use that on the skin, and then have a spritzing bottle of alcohol spray and use that on top of the exfoliated skin. It burns just thinking about it. It burns just thinking about it. Again, advanced play. Assess your own risk profile. This is intense. And especially if you then follow that up with like some caning or paddles afterwards, like, you are going to be out in the stratosphere after that experience, let me tell you. I have seen it happen in dungeons. It is an intense experience. All right, well, I think that is all we have time for in today's video. Those are all the suggestions that I have. And again, I just want to reemphasize here. Experimentation is your number one friend when it comes to going into those higher levels of play. You know those weird ideas you have when you first wake up in the morning or when you're getting ready to go to bed? Like, remember those ideas. Pull your friends for ideas. Ask me for ideas. I have many ideas. They're all terrible. That's why I make these videos. But anyways, that's everything for today. If you guys have any comments, questions, suggestions for your own ways that you take your masochism to the next level, I would love to hear from you. You can leave that down in the comment section below. If you really enjoyed this, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of BDSM related topics. And if you really enjoyed this, if you want to have access to some of the tutorials, other things that I mentioned in today's video, the best way you can do that is through Patreon. Link to that will be down in the description box below. That is where I have extra bonus videos, exclusive content that I can't put here on YouTube, photo shoots, a Discord chat, all sorts of fun things. So if you haven't already, please check that out. Link to it will again be down in the description box below. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.